This is the entrance to Cathedral Campground. The campground sits at about 7,000 feet. It's almost exactly 7,000 feet, actually. And the road, at least up to this part of the campground, is pretty well graded. But, honestly, if you've made it this far, we're 25, 30 miles from the nearest paved road. So, you probably don't care too much about the road conditions. But it's a small campground. There's only 6 sites and no services other than a pit toilet. So there's no running water, no electricity. Like that sign just said, pack it out, pack it in. And there's no wood gathering, some of the sign there. So it's pretty basic, but the kind of person that's coming up here probably doesn't mind that. And all 6 sites are very different, but similar at the same time. They don't really have numbers per se, but if I'm going to call this site 1 just because this is the first site that you see when you come into the park, or into the campground rather, they all have large picnic tables. You could probably sit 8 to 10 people there. A very large fire ring with a grill grate, flippable grill grate over the top. And then they're sort of just free-form. They're all kind of like this, where, you can kind of camp anywhere in here you want. This here is nice and shaded right now, at least in this portion of the day, so you could set up a tent, probably a large tent there if you wanted to. It's relatively flat. And then, over here you've got another spot. You could probably set up a tent there as well. So they're pretty big. This site, just like the other sites here, are pretty private. They're spaced out quite a ways apart. If you kind of look, you can sort of get glimpses of your neighbors, but you really have to kind of look. So there's plenty of privacy, and even in high season, if you want to call it that, there's very few. Let's do this. Even in high season, there's very few people that come out here. So I'm in a lull right now, according to one of the park rangers down at the visitor center. And it's just me and one other car here. It's dead quiet. It's so quiet, in fact, I can almost hear their conversation. And they're probably at least 150 feet away from me or so. But it's still very private. It gets very, very quiet up here. The one concern is the wind. It sort of sits up on a ridge. You're kind of higher than most of the other land leading up here. So, like last night for me, the wind was just completely insane, to the point where I couldn't even do anything outside. So that's definitely a concern. If we want to call this site 2, you can see it's very different. It's just a large open space. Same amenities. You've still got the picnic table, the large fire ring, plenty of room here for cars, setting up tents, and there's no real specific defined campsite for each of these. So you kind of have, within reason. You could even go back there. There's a little footpath that kind of leads to a shaded space back there. You could set up more tents back there if you wanted to. There's even a little bit of extra space over here. You could probably set up a tent there. But, like I said, pretty far apart from each other. So you've got plenty of privacy, which is nice. So after site number 2, if that's what we want to call it, the road kind of splits here, and it just makes a fairly small loop. And then the remaining 4 sites, other than the 2 that we just passed, kind of ring this loop here. You can actually see one over there. It's pretty well tucked into the trees. And the only amenity that you'll find here, which I think is a good thing, is the classic national park pit toilet. So no running water. It's literally just a toilet over a hole in the ground. It's not glamorous, but it's better than digging a cat hole, unless you're into that kind of thing. This is my site, which I guess we'll just call site number 3. And kind of same deal. You can see how deep it goes back. There's a picnic table here. There's a fire ring. This is kind of an interesting feature. It almost looks like a piece of art to me, but it's almost like a perfect little love seat. I mean, horseflies out here they're like hummingbirds. But then you can see how deep this goes back. So I found a small spot here. It was nice and level. Yesterday it was shaded in this tree over here, so you know, it's a pretty good spot. I mean, you could set up probably a 6-person tent there. This is only a 2-person. But then it goes further, you know, further back. I mean, it's not really a footpath, but you can kind of explore back there. You can see all the valley features from here. I mean, just amazing views. The first 2 spots, I would say, are much more shaded and kind of shielded from these views. But if you go towards the back and you pick one of the rear 3, I guess I would say spots 3, 4, 5. So if we're saying this is spot 3, this is one where you get some pretty decent views. And then you've got another site here for if you want to put a tent there. It's a very small campground, aside from the fact that there's only 6 sites. You know, this loop that I'm walking right now, I mean, you can walk from the entrance around this loop and back again in probably 5 minutes. I mean, it's very, very small. So I'm going to skip site 4 because there's somebody there right now. I want to give them their privacy. So if we're calling this site 5, there's kind of a back-end space over here where you could park a car if you wanted to. And then, you know, same deal, picnic table, fire ring. This site is, I would say, is a little bit smaller than the rest in terms of setting up a tent, because this whole area is fairly rocky. You've got a small area in here where you could set up a really small tent that's relatively level. And if you wanted to, you could go over there too. You'd be in the shade of that tree, but you are kind of in view of the people at site 4. So you don't have as much privacy there. And then at site 5, so if we just keep heading down, we check out the last site, which is site 6. And this has probably the widest parking area, entrance area of all of the sites. You've got kind of a nice sweeping, you know, kind of turnout style parking space here. And this site is very large. You have the fire ring and an accessible picnic table at the beginning. Plenty of seating around here, around the fire ring itself. And then it opens up to this really large space, which looks like people have kind of driven some cars through, but I don't know that you can really do that easily. But you can see all of this space here. I mean, you could set up a whole cluster of tents if you wanted to. There's plenty of room. And this site probably has the best overall shade, at least in the morning. The sites here are pretty much a mix of sun and shade. It really just depends on the time of day. I would say, you know, you're probably looking at, throughout the day, every site gets about 75% sun and 25% shade. I mean, if I really had to, and that's just a guess. So you don't have these towering trees that you might get at some other national parks. I mean, we are pretty high up here, so this is about as high as anything grows. But that's it. That is site number 6. And then if you keep going down here, you just complete the loop. So that's it. That is all of Cathedral Valley Campground. There's only 6 sites. It's all first come, first serve. They do not accept reservations, but I get the sense that this is not the kind of campground that fills up. So there's a good chance that even if you drive all the way out here, you'll probably have a spot, even in high season. If you're seeking solitude in the national parks, Utah national parks, I would definitely recommend it here. Aside from the wind and the brutal summer heat, if you come in shoulder season, it's just a beautiful place. So I would definitely recommend checking it out. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.